I have read all of these books so that you don't have to. Welcome to my series where I am reviewing books about periods, menstrual cycles, women's health, that kind of stuff. There are a lot of books out there, and some of them are like really specific, some of them are kind of more general, and so I'm just gonna review all the books that I have read and let you know what I think. Hi, welcome back to my series where I am giving book reviews for all these different like period, menstrual cycle books. So the first book that I'm going to review is Period Power by Maisie Hill. Maisie Hill is an acupuncturist who has studied a lot about the menstrual cycle. So she's written this nice big book about the menstrual cycle. And she's also written a second called Perimenopause Power, which is about the same size. So this book is about 300 pages, 310 pages. So it's big, and so that's like the main pro about this book is that it includes everything. It is very thorough. She talks about everything there is to know about everything, like menstrual health issues, menstrual health experiences, menstrual health issues. She talks about all the hormone stuff, hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. And then she does make the distinction between the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And then she also talks about the thyroid. She talks about she goes through a basic overview of the cycle. She talks about like all the anatomical stuff. She has the diagrams, all the anatomical diagrams and all that kind of stuff. So I do like that the diagrams show the stages of the maturing follicles in the ovaries, and then which ovulate and then degenerate into a corpus luteum. Yeah, so all of that is good. She also talks about like reproductive health and sexual biology, stuff like that. She talks about the seasons of the cycle. She talks about tracking your cycle. She talks about what can go wrong. She talks about pretty much anything that could go wrong. She talks about it. She talks about things as simple as cramps to yeast infections, fibroids, endometriosis, all kinds of stuff. So she does all of that biology stuff. Then she also gets into like some practical advice. She talks about dietary stuff, nutrition stuff. She also then kind of gets a little deeper. She talks about the seasons. She talks about how you kind of generally feel more introverted, more introspective during your period. But she says that your period is like winter, and then the follicular phase is like spring. And then she says that ovulation is like summer. And then she says that during your luteal phase, you are like dying inside. So then you're kind of like autumn, you're not like fall. So I appreciate that aspect of the seasons. I shift it over a little bit. So your period, in my book, I say that your period is symbolized by autumn, the follicular phase is symbolized by winter, and ovulation is like spring because of the blooming flowers, and then the luteal phase is like summer because of your high basal body temperatures, like the hot temperatures during summer, and obviously other reasons. That's why I wrote a whole book on it. But anyway, so everybody kind of has their own perspective, and that's the main point is that our cycles are related to nature. They are related to the seasons, and so I like that she does talk about that. She also gets into life advice in a certain way of like, subheading here is the power of no, and anger is an energy. And so self-care essentials, which is good, but then she kind of like talks about a lot of the day-to-day reality of being a woman, and from her perspective she gives a lot of advice of things of like, and so this power of no subheading, it's like, yes, I agree you should have healthy boundaries and stuff like that, but um yeah, and then anger is an energy. Yeah, I feel like, she talks about that, especially with the in the luteal phase. This is, and see, that's the thing, that's her subheading for this chapter is Highway to Hell. So I actually think that that is not quite a positive perspective on the luteal phase, and so my book, I try to be a little bit more positive. So she talks about all of this, like passive aggressiveness, blah, blah, blah. But then she obviously will come to a more positive conclusion, I guess. But in general, I kind of feel like it's a little bit more negative. So, so that is kind of like a theme that it's like we're trying to be positive while also like we can't help but be negative because like that's the kind of milieu we've been raised in. So that's where I kind of feel like that that is what I feel like Maisie Hill is in as well. Anyway, so then moving on, she also talks about birth control. As I said, she talks about reproductive health and sexual biology and stuff like that. So she does get into birth control, and she gets into a lot of different sexual topics. I don't do birth control. I don't do condoms or anything like that. When I was single, and now that I am married, like we don't use condoms. We don't use any kind of contraception or anything like that. Because yeah, I just think that natural is best, and being one with your spouse, which is what marriage is supposed to be, includes everything. It includes everything. So yeah, so I just like her information on birth control and like sexual advice and stuff like that. I just don't need it, and I wouldn't recommend her advice to other people. Okay, so I'll go back to something that I do like about this book, and then I'll go to something that I don't like about this book. So one thing I do like about this book is she talks about the moon. She references somebody else's book, and kind of just talks about the moon and how the different phases of the moon are kind of. And I like this sentence. She says, um, in each phase of the lunar cycle, there are qualities and actions which mirror those of the seasons of the menstrual cycle. So I very much agree with that, and I line up the symbolism the same way that she does. So she says the new moon is related to menstruation, the waxing moon is related to the follicular phase, which she calls pre-ovulation, the full moon is related to ovulation, and the waning moon is related to the luteal phase, which she calls pre-menstruation. So yeah, I have the same parallels in my book. So then the other thing that I don't like about this book is, again, with some of that secular mindset, she says things like, oh yeah, right here. Boys are typically raised with a sense of entitlement and told that girls like to play hard. Oh, girls like to play hard to get, and that they really want it if they say they don't. So, um, yeah, I just don't agree with that. I just don't. I just don't agree with that. I just don't. I think there are plenty of boys out there like that. Um, but I don't think that that is a universal statement. Um, okay, then going back to like sexual morality, she also says like masturbation is a fantastic option, which I don't agree with. I don't think that masturbation is good for your soul. Um, so you may not agree with me there, but that's just what I think. Okay, so the other thing that I dislike about what she says, not everyone who menstruates. I just can't. I just can't. I don't agree with that. Um, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I just can't get behind that. There are women who are born without uteruses and without ovaries, and that is a tragedy. But everyone who menstruates is a woman. Okay, so to end on a positive note, um, this book is full of a lot of good advice, good information. She goes into the metabolism of estrogen. As I said before, she goes into all kinds of the ailments and stuff, and she'll give, she'll explain about it, and then she'll give kind of like a what to do next of stuff you can do to like ease your symptoms, help heal your body, stuff like that. That which is really great. That is my review of Period Power by Maisie Hill. So I hope you enjoy this review and stay tuned for some others. Thank you.